I never thought I'd be sitting alone in a house that suddenly felt too large, too empty, and somehow no longer mine. The grandfather clock in the hallway, the one Maxwell insisted on restoring himself despite having no experience with antiques, ticked relentlessly, each sound reminding me that time continued moving forward even when my world had stopped. 3 weeks had passed since I buried my husband, but the pain remained as fresh as the roses I placed on his grave every Sunday. What I didn't expect was that my grief would soon be overshadowed by a battle I never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Whitcroft, though everyone has called me Ellie since before I can remember. At 58, I never imagined I'd be starting over. Maxwell and I had 23 beautiful years together. We met later in life, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships. Mine was emotional scars from a divorce. His was 3 nearly grown children who never quite warmed to the idea of their father finding happiness again. Our wedding at Azure Bay was intimate, with the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and purple. Maxwell's children, Piers, Bianca, and Xavier, stood stiffly in expensive attire, offering mechanical congratulations while their eyes remained cold. I tried for years to bridge the gap, hosting holiday dinners, remembering birthdays, attending their graduations and weddings. Nothing seemed to thaw the ice. Eventually, Maxwell and I created our own bubble of happiness, focusing on each other and the life we built together at Halcyon Estate. Maxwell's death was unexpected, a heart attack, while working late at Whitcroft Industries headquarters. One moment he was finalizing acquisition paperwork. The next, he was gone. I wasn't even granted the chance to say goodbye. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and whispered condolences. I remember standing beside the casket, my hand resting on the polished wood, while Piers organized the proceedings with clinical efficiency. Bianca handled the reception with the same precision she applied to her luxury real estate showings. Xavier stood in the corner, nursing a drink, his eyes darting occasionally to the family portrait where his father's hand rested on my shoulder. It was exactly 1 week after the funeral when they descended upon Halcyon Estate, all 3 of them arriving within minutes of each other as if coordinated. "Ellie," Piers began, not bothering to remove his designer sunglasses as he strode into the living room. At 36, he had his father's height, but none of his warmth. "We need to discuss the estate." Bianca settled herself on the antique, fainting couch, crossing her legs elegantly. "We've been patient, giving you time to grieve, but certain matters can't wait." Xavier, the youngest at 30, wandered around the room, picking up and examining objects as if calculating their value. Dad would want everything sorted quickly. He always hated loose ends. I invited them to sit, offering tea that none of them accepted. Josephine, our housekeeper of 15 years, quietly brought in a tray anyway, her eyes meeting mine with silent support. "What matters need discussing?" I asked, wrapping my fingers around a warm teacup. Piers cleared his throat. "Father's will, of course. The reading is scheduled for tomorrow at Blackstone Law offices. We wanted to speak with you beforehand to ensure a smooth transition." Transition? The word felt wrong in my mouth. "Father built this company from nothing," Bianca interjected. "Whitcroft Industries is our legacy, our birthright. We've all worked there since university." This wasn't entirely true. Piers had indeed followed his father into business, holding an executive position. Bianca occasionally consulted on property, acquisitions. Xavier had been given various roles over the years, none of which he maintained for more than a few months. "Maxwell never discussed the specifics of his will with me," I said truthfully. "He always said everything was taken care of." Xavier snorted, finally dropping into a chair. "Come on, Ellie. You must have some idea what you're getting. The jewelry? A stipend? Maybe the vacation house in Vermont?" The casual dismissal in his tone made my tea suddenly taste bitter. These three adults sitting before me had never seen me as their father's wife, only as an interloper, someone temporary despite over 2 decades of marriage. "I suppose we'll all find out tomorrow," I replied evenly. "We thought it might be easier," Piers continued, ignoring my response, "if we discussed your living arrangements now. Halcyon has been in the Whitcroft family for generations." "It's where we grew up," Bianca added, her gaze sweeping critically over the renovations Maxwell and I had made together. "It holds tremendous sentimental value for us." I set my cup down with deliberate care. "Maxwell and I have lived here for 20 years. This is my home." "It's a Whitcroft family property," Piers corrected, his tone hardening. "We're simply suggesting you might be more comfortable in a smaller place. The maintenance alone must be overwhelming for someone." He paused, his eyes taking in my appearance. "For someone in your position." My position. Widow. Childless. Aging. The unspoken words hung in the air between us. "I manage quite well, thank you," I replied. "Josephine has been invaluable." At the mention of her name, Josephine appeared in the doorway. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Whitcroft?" The formality was intentional, a small reminder of my place in this house. The stepchildren exchanged glances. "Perhaps," Xavier suggested with mock concern, "you could stay with friends until everything is settled. The reading of the will can be emotional. We wouldn't want you overwhelmed." I'd spent 23 years swallowing remarks, making excuses for their behavior, telling Maxwell it didn't matter. But Maxwell was gone now, and with him, my patience for pretense. "I'll be staying right here," I said firmly. "This is where Maxwell wanted me to be." Piers' mouth tightened. "We'll see what Father actually wanted tomorrow, won't we?" He stood abruptly. "We should go. Early start tomorrow." As they filed out, Bianca paused at the door. "I've taken the liberty of having some boxes delivered, in case you want to get a head start organizing your personal items." The door closed, behind them with a definitive click. Josephine waited until their luxury cars had disappeared down the driveway before speaking. "Those vultures didn't even wait for Mr. Maxwell to be properly laid to rest." Her Jamaican accent, usually tempered, for visitors, emerged fully in her anger. I stared at the untouched tea tray. "They've always been waiting for this moment, Joe. The moment when Maxwell wouldn't be here to mediate." She collected the cups with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Maxwell was no fool, Mrs. Ellie. He knew his children better than they think. I wasn't as confident." Maxwell had blind spots where his children were concerned, always making excuses, always giving second chances. It was both his greatest quality and his greatest weakness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through our bedroom, touching Maxwell's things, the reading glasses on his nightstand, the half-used bottle of cologne, the worn leather slippers by the bed. For the first time since his death, I opened his closet, burying my face in his shirts, searching for traces of his scent. Behind a row of suits, I noticed something unusual, a small safe I'd never seen before. My heart quickened. Maxwell and I had a shared safe in the study for important documents. But this was different. This was hidden. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the discovery. What secrets had Maxwell kept from me? Was I about to uncover something that would shatter the perfect image of our marriage? My hand trembled as I dialed the most obvious combination, our anniversary date. The safe remained locked. His birthday, the day we met, the year Halcyon was built. Nothing worked. Exhausted and frustrated, I whispered aloud, "What were you hiding, Max?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sleep eventually claimed me, but my dreams were troubled. I stood in an empty Halcyon estate, calling for Maxwell while his children systematically removed everything around me. Furniture, paintings, even the walls, until I stood exposed in an empty lot, completely alone. The next morning, I dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit Maxwell had always admired, pearls he'd given me for our 20th anniversary, and his mother's diamond brooch that had been his first gift to me. If I was walking into battle, I would do so with armor. Josephine insisted on driving me to Blackstone law offices. "You shouldn't be alone today," she said simply. The building was imposing, a Victorian structure of dark stone and gleaming brass fixtures. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed, reverent, smelling of leather-bound books and furniture polish. Dr. Theodore Blackwood's assistant led us to a conference room where the stepchildren already waited, along with a woman I recognized as Margot, Chen, Maxwell's business partner of 30 years. Margot rose immediately to embrace me. "Ellie, my dear, how are you holding up?" Before I could answer, Dr. Blackwood entered, tall, silver-haired, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been Maxwell's lawyer, confidant, and friend for decades. "Thank you all for coming," he began, setting his briefcase on the table. "Before we proceed with the reading of Maxwell Whitcroft's last will and testament, I have a rather unusual request from Maxwell himself." He removed an envelope from his briefcase. He asked that I read this letter privately to Eleanor first. Piers immediately objected. "That's highly irregular. The will should be read in its entirety to all beneficiaries simultaneously." Dr. Blackwood regarded him calmly. "Your father's instructions were explicit. Mrs. Whitcroft is to hear this message alone before we continue. You're welcome to wait. Or we can reschedule." "This is ridiculous," Xavier muttered. "She's probably coached him to do this." "Enough," Margot said sharply. "Maxwell's wishes will be respected." Dr. Blackwood led me to his private office, a sanctuary of books and antiques. Once the door closed, he turned to me with unexpected warmth. "Ellie, I want you to know that Maxwell anticipated this day with great care. Everything that happens from this point forward is by his design." He broke the seal on the envelope and began to read. "My dearest Ellie, if you're hearing this, I've left you too soon, and for that, I am truly sorry. 23 years wasn't nearly enough time together, but I treasure every moment we shared. You're about to face a storm. My children have never appreciated your worth, never understood that you were the best part of me. They see Whitcroft Industries as their inheritance, Halcyon as their birthright, and you as an obstacle. I've known this for years. What they don't know, what I've kept from everyone but Theo and Margot, is that Whitcroft Industries would have collapsed 15 years ago without your brilliant intervention. I've never forgotten how you stayed up nights analyzing the financial reports I brought home, how you spotted the discrepancy no one else saw, how you developed the restructuring plan that saved thousands of jobs. You insisted I take the credit, worried that my children would resent you even more if they knew the truth. The company they believe is their inheritance exists today because of you. The will they're about to hear is not my final word. It is a test, one last chance for them to show decency and character. Watch them carefully, my love. Their reactions will tell you everything. Remember always that you are the heart of Halcyon, the soul of everything I've built. Trust Theo, trust Margot, trust Josephine. All my love for all time, Maxwell." My hands shook as Dr. Blackwood folded the letter. "I don't understand," I whispered. "What test?" "Maxwell created 2 wills," he explained quietly. "The one we're about to read, and another that activates under specific conditions. He wanted to give his children one last opportunity to do the right thing. And if they fail this test?" His expression was grave. "Then the second will comes into effect, and everything changes. Are you ready to proceed?" I took a steadying breath, thinking of the hidden safe, of Maxwell's careful planning. "Yes, Let's get this over with. When we returned to the conference room, the tension was palpable. The stepchildren watched me with suspicious eyes as I took my seat. Dr. Blackwood adjusted his glasses and began to read. I, Maxwell Edward Whitcroft, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. The room grew still as he continued, outlining the distribution of assets that shocked us all. To Piers, Bianca, and Xavier jointly, control of Whitcroft. Industries and all associated holdings. To the 3 children equally, ownership of Halcyon Estate, and all properties except the Vermont cabin. To me, the Vermont vacation home, a modest monthly stipend, and Maxwell's personal possessions. The stepchildren couldn't hide their triumphant expressions. Piers actually reached over to pat my hand condescendingly. Father was quite generous to you, considering, he murmured. The Vermont property is quite valuable. Dr. Blackwood cleared his throat. There is one final condition, he continued. Eleanor shall have residence at Halcyon Estate for a period of 90 days following the reading of this will to properly organize her affairs and remove her personal belongings. During this time, the property and all its contents remain in trust. Xavier groaned. 3 more months of waiting? A reasonable courtesy, Dr. Blackwood replied evenly. There are, of course, standard clauses regarding the contestation of the will. Should any beneficiary contest these terms, their inheritance would be forfeit and redistributed among remaining beneficiaries. Are there any questions? My mind was racing. This couldn't be Maxwell's final plan, not after that letter. But I maintained a composed facade, even as Bianca began immediate discussions about redecorating Halcyon, and Piers pulled out his phone to message the Whitcroft Industries board. Actually, I said quietly, I do have a question. All eyes turned to me. The Vermont property, I can move there immediately if needed? Of course, Dr. Blackwood confirmed. That property transfers to you effective immediately. Good, I nodded, rising from my chair. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've heard enough for today. Margot followed me into the hallway. Ellie, wait. I paused, feeling suddenly exhausted. Don't let them see you broken, she whispered fiercely. Maxwell had his reasons. Trust the process. I nodded numbly and continued walking. Josephine waited by the car, her expression asking questions she wouldn't voice in public. They got everything, I said simply as she opened the door. Exactly. As they expected. Her fingers tightened on the door handle. Everything, Mrs. Ellie? Almost everything, I corrected, thinking of the mysterious safe, the hidden second will, Maxwell's cryptic letter. We have 90 days before we need to leave Halcyon. And then, I stared out the window at Blackstone Law offices where the stepchildren were now emerging, Piers already on his phone, Bianca laughing about something, Xavier lighting a cigarette. And then we see what Maxwell really had planned. The drive back to Halcyon was silent, my mind spinning with possibilities. What was the test Maxwell had designed? What conditions would trigger the second will? And most puzzling, why had he kept secrets from me, his partner, and everything else? As we pulled through the wrought iron gates of the estate, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the entrance, a police cruiser. A man in plain clothes stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, waiting. Were you expecting anyone? Josephine asked, tensing. No, I frowned, studying the stranger. Stay in the car until I see what this is about. As I approached, the man straightened. Mrs. Whitcroft? I'm Detective Vincent Caldwell, Ravensdale Police Department. I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to speak with you regarding your husband's company. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. What about it? There are some financial irregularities we're investigating. Nothing concerning you directly, he added quickly, seeing my expression. but we believe your husband may have uncovered something significant before his death." The pieces began shifting in my mind. Maxwell, working late the night of his heart attack, the hidden safe, his cryptic letter about saving the company. "Perhaps we could speak inside?" the detective suggested. I nodded, suddenly feeling that Maxwell's test had already begun, and I was determined not to fail. Detective Caldwell settled into Maxwell's study with a practiced ease that suggested he'd conducted many such interviews in homes just as grand as Halcyon. I watched him carefully as Josephine brought in tea, his eyes scanning the room, lingering on the photographs, the awards, the subtle signs of wealth that permeated every corner. "How long were you married to Maxwell Whitcroft?" he asked, declining the offered cup. 23 years, I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Though I've known him for 25. He nodded, jotting something in a small notebook. "And were you involved in Whitcroft Industries?" The question seemed innocent enough, but after Maxwell's letter, I felt a prickle of awareness. "Not officially. Maxwell and I discussed business, of course, but I had no formal role." "I see." His eyes met mine briefly. "Are you aware that approximately 15 years ago, Whitcroft Industries underwent a significant restructuring? One that, by all accounts, saved the company from certain bankruptcy?" My teacup paused halfway to my lips. Maxwell mentioned challenges during that period. He weathered many storms in business. "The interesting thing," Caldwell continued, "is that financial experts who've studied the case call it miraculous. A complete reversal of fortune based on strategies that weren't exactly in line with Maxwell Whitcroft's usual business approach." I set my cup down carefully. My husband was adaptable. Successful people often are. "Mrs. Whitcroft, I'll be direct. We're investigating a series of unusual financial transactions at Whitcroft Industries over the past 6 months. Large sums, moving through shell companies, investments in ventures that seem designed to fail, and a pattern of behavior that suggests someone was deliberately weakening the company from within." I felt my breath catch. "Are you suggesting corporate sabotage?" "I'm suggesting your husband may have discovered it." He leaned forward. The night Maxwell died, he wasn't just working late. He had scheduled a meeting with me for the following morning. His assistant said he was agitated, insisted on gathering certain documents personally. The implications staggered me. Maxwell's heart attack, had it truly been natural? Or had the stress of discovering betrayal within his own company pushed his health past its limits? "Do you have any idea what he might have wanted to show you?" I asked. "That's what I was hoping you could tell me. Did he bring any work home? Mention concerns? Perhaps store documents somewhere secure?" The hidden safe instantly came to mind. But I wasn't ready to share that discovery. Not yet. Not until I understood more. "Nothing specific," I said. "Though I can look through his home office. He sometimes brought files home." Caldwell seemed disappointed, but not surprised. "I'd appreciate that, Mrs. Whitcroft. And if you remember anything at all, please call me immediately." He handed me his card. Even small details could be significant. After showing him out, I turned to find Josephine watching me intently. "You didn't tell him everything," she observed. Not a question, but a statement. "Neither did he," I replied. "He knows more than he's saying." I returned to the study, looking at it with new eyes. The detective's visit had transformed Halcyon from simply a home I was losing to the scene of something far more complex. Had Maxwell been murdered? Was that why he'd created 2 wills? Because he suspected he might not have time to expose the truth? The grandfather clock struck 3, startling me from my thoughts. The stepchildren would likely descend soon, eager to begin inventorying their inheritance. I needed to act quickly. "Joe," I called, finding her organizing linens in the hallway cabinet. "I need your help with something." Together we returned to the bedroom, where I showed her the hidden safe. "All these years," she murmured, running. her fingers over the metal door. And Mr. Maxwell never mentioned it. Never, I confirmed. I've tried obvious combinations, but nothing works. Josephine studied the lock thoughtfully. What about Azure Bay, the date you first went there? I froze. Maxwell had proposed at Azure Bay on a perfect autumn day. The numbers came to me, instantly, 10, 17, or 01. With trembling fingers, I dialed the combination. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Inside was a single USB drive and a folded note in Maxwell's handwriting. For Ellie's eyes only. The password is where I first called you, my heart. I clutched the drive, memories washing over me. The glass pavilion, the restaurant where Maxwell had first used that endearment during a rainstorm that trapped us inside for hours. We'd returned every anniversary since. We need to check what's on this, I said, moving toward the study. Before anyone else arrives. The computer hummed to life, and I inserted the drive. A single encrypted file appeared, requesting a password. I typed Glass Pavilion and held my breath. Access denied. I tried again with variations. Glass Pavilion, the Glass Pavilion, Glass Pavilion, 1999. But nothing worked. It's not just the place, Josephine suggested gently. Think about the moment. What made it special? I closed my eyes, allowing myself to be transported back. The rain pounding against the windows, the candlelight when the power failed, the dessert we shared, a chocolate souffle that collapsed the moment it reached our table, making us laugh, the music playing softly in the background. Moonlight Sonata, I whispered, opening my eyes. They were playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata when he first called me his heart. I typed Moonlight Sonata and pressed enter. The file unlocked, revealing dozens of documents, spreadsheets, and video files, all meticulously organized and labeled. The most recent was a video file dated the day before Maxwell died, titled simply, For Ellie. With Josephine standing behind me, I clicked, play. Maxwell's face filled the screen, looking tired but resolute. My breath caught at seeing him again, so alive, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he was thinking deeply. Ellie, my heart, he began, his voice washing over me like a familiar embrace. If you're watching this, then either I've told you about this investigation, or I'm no longer there to tell you myself. I pray it's the former, but I've learned to prepare for the worst. He shifted, running a hand through his silver hair, a gesture so achingly familiar that tears sprang to my eyes. For months now, I've been tracking unusual patterns in our company finances. At first, I thought it was just poor decision-making, but the more I dug, the clearer it became. Someone is systematically looting Whitcroft Industries from within, using sophisticated methods designed to escape notice. Maxwell leaned closer to the camera, his expression grave. I've traced the activity and what I've found. Ellie, it's my children. All three of them, working together. They've created an elaborate network of shell companies to funnel money away from our main holdings. They're destroying everything I've built, not just stealing from me, but from thousands of employees who depend on this company for their livelihoods. My hand flew to my mouth. Despite everything, I hadn't expected this level of betrayal. I've compiled evidence. It's all here in these files. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Detective Caldwell. I've known Vincent for years. He's thorough and discreet. If anything happens to me before I can show him these files, I need you to continue this work. The password to my private email is in the file marked Communication. Margot has duplicates of some documents, but not all. He paused, his expression softening. Ellie, I'm so sorry for keeping this from you. I wanted to protect you from this ugliness. I've always known my children resented you, but I never imagined they would go this far, risking prison, destroying lives, all for money they would have inherited anyway. Maxwell looked away briefly, composing himself. When he faced the camera, again his jaw was set with determination. I've put contingencies in place. The will that Theo will read first is not my final word. It's a test. One last chance for my children to show a shred of decency. But based on what I've uncovered, I don't hold much hope. He smiled sadly. My greatest regret is that I didn't stand up for you more fiercely against their coldness. I told myself they would come around eventually, that they just needed time. I was a coward, making excuses for their behavior because facing the truth was too painful. For that, I can only ask your forgiveness. Tears streamed down my face now, unchecked. Follow the evidence, Ellie. Trust Theo, trust Margot, trust Josephine. They know parts of the plan. And remember that Halcyon was never just a house to me, it was wherever you were. Maxwell's eyes held mine across time and space. I love you, my heart. Always. The screen went dark. Josephine's hand settled on my shoulder, steady and warm. Mr. Maxwell was preparing for war, she said quietly. I wiped my tears, a cold determination replacing grief. And now I'll finish it for him. We spent the next hour examining the files. Maxwell had been meticulous, documenting every fraudulent transaction, every falsified report, every shell company. The evidence was damning. Not just embezzlement, but tax fraud, investor deception, even blackmail of board members who asked too many questions. Most shocking were the personal communications, emails between the siblings discussing their father's health, speculating on how soon they might cash in. There were even discussions about speeding up the process if necessary. They may have killed him, I whispered, feeling ill. Maybe not directly, but they knew the stress could trigger his heart condition. They counted on it. Before we could dig deeper, the security system chimed, announcing visitors at the gate. The computer screen showed 3 cars, Piers, Bianca, and Xavier arriving separately but simultaneously, just as they had after the funeral. Perfect timing, I muttered darkly. Joe, make copies of everything on this drive. I'm going to see what they want. Be careful, Mrs. Ellie, Josephine warned, her expression worried. If they did what Mr. Maxwell suspected. I touched her arm reassuringly. I know. I'll play the grieving, defeated widow. It's what they expect. The stepchildren had let themselves in by the time I reached the foyer. Piers was already directing a young man with a tablet around the room, pointing at furniture and artwork. What's going on? I asked, feigning confusion. Bianca smiled thinly. Just a preliminary inventory, Ellie. Nothing to concern yourself with. An inventory? I repeated. The will said I have 90 days before. The property remains in trust during that period, Piers interrupted smoothly. But nothing prevents us from assessing its contents. This is Marcus from Sotheby's. He's helping us document the more valuable pieces. Xavier was already examining a Ming Dynasty vase that Maxwell had purchased on our 10th anniversary trip to China. This alone should fetch a pretty penny, he remarked, turning it carelessly in his hands. I fought to keep my expression neutral, to swallow the rage building inside me. I see. And what about your father's personal items? His clothes, his books, the things that held sentimental rather than monetary value? The siblings exchanged, glances that spoke volumes. They hadn't even considered such things. You're welcome to those, of course, Bianca said dismissively. In fact, why don't you focus on sorting through that stuff while we handle the more significant items? I nodded meekly. I suppose that makes sense. I'll just stay out of your way. Piers seemed relieved by my easy acquiescence. Excellent. We'll try to be efficient. The sooner everything's cataloged, the sooner we can all move forward. I retreated to the study, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I could see more vehicles arriving, professional movers, more appraisers, even a landscape architect measuring the gardens. They weren't just planning to sell Halcyon. They were preparing to strip it bare, erase every trace of the life Maxwell and I had built together. My phone buzzed with a text from Josephine. Files copied. Detective Caldwell called. Wants to meet tomorrow, the Glass Pavilion, noon. I texted back a quick acknowledgement, then sat at Maxwell's desk, running my fingers over the polished mahogany. From this spot, I could hear the stepchildren in the hallway, their voices carrying through the old house as they assigned values to everything in sight. The chandelier in the dining room, Venetian crystal, probably 18th century. 6. Figures easily. These first editions, get someone from the rare book department to look at them. God, she redecorated the East Wing. We'll have to gut it completely. Their callousness was no longer surprising, merely confirming what Maxwell's files had already shown. These were not people mourning their father. They were vultures circling a carcass, impatient to pick it clean. I opened Maxwell's desk drawer, seeking a distraction, and found a leather-bound journal I'd given him years ago. Inside were not the business notes I expected, but sketches. Dozens of them, dating back years. Sketches of me reading in the garden, laughing in the kitchen, sleeping peacefully. Maxwell had captured moments I hadn't even realized he'd noticed, each drawing signed with a tiny heart. The last entry was dated just 3 days before his death. It wasn't a sketch, but a written passage. Walked with Ellie along the cliffs at Azure Bay today. She doesn't know yet what I've discovered. The rot at the core of everything I've built. I watch her face in the sunlight, so full of life and love. And I can't bring myself to shatter her world with the truth about my children. But time is running short. The evidence is nearly complete. Soon I'll have to act and everything will change. I only pray she'll understand why I've kept this from her, why I've constructed such an elaborate plan. It's all for her, to ensure that when the dust settles, she'll be secure, vindicated, and free from their machinations forever. I closed the journal, holding it to my chest. Even at the end, he'd been protecting me, shouldering the burden alone when we could have faced it together. How typical of Maxwell, both his strength and his flaw, believing he needed to shield me from life's harshest realities. A sharp knock at the study door jolted me from my thoughts. Xavier entered without waiting for a response, his eyes darting around the room assessingly. "We need the combination to Father's safe," he demanded, "the one in the master bedroom closet." My heart stuttered. How did he know about that? The safe had been hidden behind clothing, not visible unless you were specifically looking for it. Safe? I echoed, buying time. I wasn't aware of any safe. Xavier's expression hardened. "Don't play dumb, Ellie. We know it's there. Father would have given you access." "Your father kept many things private," I replied truthfully. "If there is a safe, I don't have the combination." He studied me, clearly deciding whether to believe me. "Fine. We'll get a locksmith tomorrow." After he left, I sat frozen, my mind racing. They knew about the safe. Had they been searching the house while I was at the will reading? And if they got into it and found it empty, they would know I'd discovered Maxwell's files. I needed to move faster than I'd planned. Picking up my phone, I texted Josephine. "Change of plans. Call Margot. Tell her I need to see her tonight. Not here. Somewhere private." Then I gathered Maxwell's journal and a few precious photographs, tucking them into my handbag. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let these memories fall into their hands. For the rest of the afternoon, I wandered Halcyon like a ghost, watching the stepchildren dismantle our home piece by piece. I maintained an air of resigned sadness, occasionally asking plaintively if I might keep a particular item for sentimental reasons. Sometimes they agreed magnanimously. More often, they refused, citing the item's value or historical significance to the Whitcroft family. By evening, the ground floor had been thoroughly inventoried, with small red stickers marking items destined for auction houses, museums, or the siblings' personal collections. Very little remained unclaimed. "We'll continue upstairs tomorrow," Piers announced as the various experts filed out. "The master suite, the guest rooms, then the attics." I nodded tiredly. "Will you be staying for dinner? I could ask Josephine to prepare something." The question was met with awkward glances. "We have reservations at Chez Philippe," Bianca said finally. "Business dinner with some of Father's former associates." "Of course," I murmured. "Another time, perhaps." I watched from the front steps as their cars disappeared down the driveway, then returned to the kitchen where Josephine waited expectantly. "Margot can meet you at her boat," she reported. 8 o'clock. She says to use the private entrance at the marina. Margot Chen lived on a luxury houseboat at Ravensdale Marina, an eccentricity that had raised eyebrows in business circles, but suited her independent spirit perfectly. The vessel, aptly named Autonomy, was her sanctuary from the corporate world she navigated so skillfully. At precisely 8, I slipped through the hidden gate Margot had described, finding myself on a private dock where the Autonomy gleamed, under subtle lighting. Margot herself waited on deck, her silver hair pulled back in its characteristic sleek bun, her keen eyes missing nothing as I approached. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting, helping me aboard. "But, considering everything, that's to be expected." Inside, the boat was surprisingly spacious, all clean lines and minimalist decor, a sharp contrast to Halcyon's traditional opulence. Margot poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to me without asking if I wanted it. "Drink," she instructed. "Then tell me everything." I did both, starting with the will reading and continuing through Detective Caldwell's visit, the hidden safe, Maxwell's video message, and the Stepchildren's systematic inventory of Halcyon. Margot listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "Those ungrateful parasites," she muttered when I finished. "Maxwell was too good to them, always defending them, always giving them another chance." "Did you know?" I asked quietly. "About the embezzlement?" She sighed heavily. "I knew something was wrong. Numbers that didn't add up, projects that failed despite perfect planning. I started investigating privately about 3 months ago. When I brought my concerns to Maxwell, he admitted he'd been tracking similar discrepancies. That's when he told me about his contingency plan." "The second will," I said. Margot nodded. "He was devastated, Ellie. Discovering your children are not just disappointing but criminal? It broke something in him. But he was determined to protect the company, the employees, and most of all, you. What exactly does this second will do?" "I don't know all the details. Maxwell compartmentalized the plan, giving each of us only the pieces we needed to know. Theo has the actual document. I know it transfers control of Whitcroft Industries to you, with me as co-executor, until you decide whether to maintain ownership or sell." I blinked in surprise. "Me? But I have no experience running a company of that size." Margot's laugh was sharp. "Don't be modest, Ellie. Maxwell told me years ago about your role in the restructuring. He always said you had the financial instincts. He lacked. Besides, you don't have to run it. Just own it long enough to clean house and install proper management." "And Halcyon?" "Yours entirely, I believe, along with most of the Whitcroft fortune. The children receive significantly reduced inheritances, enough to live comfortably if managed well, but not the windfall they're expecting." I sipped my whiskey, letting the information settle. "When does this second will activate?" "That's where things get complicated. Maxwell built in specific triggers, legal conditions that, when met, would invalidate the first will and activate the second. Theo knows the details." She refilled our glasses. "But based on what you've told me, I'd say we're getting very close to those conditions being met." "The inventory," I realized. They're claiming ownership of Halcyon's contents before the 90-day period has elapsed. Precisely. That violates the trust conditions. And if Detective Caldwell has evidence of their financial crimes, that's another trigger. Maxwell was very clear. Any criminal activity would immediately disinherit them. I set down my glass, suddenly overwhelmed by the scope of Maxwell's planning. He thought of everything. He had to, Margot said gently. He knew they would come after you the moment he was gone. This was his way of making amends for not standing up to them while he was alive. What do I do now? Keep playing the role of the defeated widow. Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, meet with Caldwell tomorrow. Show him Maxwell's evidence. Then we'll coordinate with Theo about the second will. She squeezed my hand. Maxwell built a fortress around you, Ellie. His children just don't know it yet. As I prepared to leave, Margot handed me a small key. For the storage locker at Westlake Security. Maxwell kept duplicates of all his evidence there, under both our names, just in case. I pocketed the key, feeling slightly steadier than when I'd arrived. Thank you, Margot, for everything. Don't thank me yet, she replied grimly. The real battle is just beginning. Returning to Halcyon that night felt different, like entering an enemy encampment rather than coming home. The lights I'd left on downstairs had been extinguished, leaving the grand facade dark and unwelcoming. Inside, the inventory stickers glowed faintly in the moonlight streaming through the windows, marking each piece of my life as claimed by others. I moved silently through the shadowed rooms, remembering happier times, Maxwell playing the piano in the music room, Sunday brunches in the solarium, quiet evenings reading by the library fire. 23 years of memories now being erased by people who had never appreciated their value. In the master bedroom, I found Josephine waiting anxiously. Mrs. Ellie, she whispered urgently. Someone's been in the safe. My blood ran cold. How? We had the only combination. They brought someone while you were out, a security expert. He drilled it open. She led me to the closet where the safe door hung askew, the metal around the lock scorched and damaged. They were looking for something specific. When they didn't find it, they were furious. Did they say what they were looking for? Josephine nodded, her expression grave. Mr. Xavier mentioned the files, said his father must have moved them. Then Miss Bianca said maybe you had them and they all got quiet and left. They knew. Somehow they knew about Maxwell's evidence, which meant they also knew I might have found it. My temporary safety lay in their uncertainty, but that wouldn't last long. Pack a bag, I instructed Josephine. Essential items only. We're not staying here tonight. Where will we go? I thought of the key in my pocket. Somewhere they won't think to look. As we slipped out the service entrance, I cast one last glance at Halcyon's silhouette against the night sky. Maxwell had called it my home, but in truth, it had never fully been mine. There had always been the weight of Whitcroft history, the ghost of his first wife in the corners, the silent judgment of his children in every room. Perhaps losing it would be a kind of freedom, if I survived what was coming next. The Westlake Security Building stood like a fortress on the outskirts of Ravensdale, a windowless concrete structure surrounded by a 12-foot fence topped with razor wire. The guard at the entrance scrutinized my identification with suspicious thoroughness before finally nodding us through. You know the way to your unit, Mrs. Whitcroft? He asked, handing back my driver's license. Yes, thank you, I lied, having never actually visited this place before. The interior was a maze of identical corridors bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Following the numbered signs, we eventually found Unit W734. The small key Margot had, given me, fit perfectly, opening to reveal a space roughly the size of a walk-in closet. Metal shelving lined the walls, stacked with labeled file boxes, hard drives, and what appeared to be recording equipment. Mr. Maxwell wasn't taking any chances, Josephine murmured, surveying the accumulated evidence. He knew what he was up against, I replied, examining the nearest box. Inside were financial reports, bank statements, and photocopies of checks, all carefully annotated in Maxwell's precise handwriting. Another box contained surveillance photographs showing peers meeting with unknown individuals in parking garages and hotel lobbies. A third held recordings of phone conversations that I couldn't bring myself to play. "There's enough here to send them all to prison," Josephine said quietly. I nodded, overwhelmed by the thoroughness of Maxwell's investigation. This wasn't just about protecting his legacy or securing my future. He'd been preparing to destroy his own children. The realization was both chilling and heartbreaking. We can't take all of this, I decided, selecting a few key files and a hard drive. But we need somewhere safe to examine what we've got. Josephine hesitated. "I might know a place. My cousin, Darius, has a vacation cabin about an hour from here. He's in Europe for the next month. No one would think to look for us there." The decision was made in seconds. Relocking the storage unit, we drove through the night to a small cabin nestled among pine trees on the shores of Lake Merritt. The place was rustic but clean, with a functioning kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and most importantly, no connection to either the Whitcroft name or my past. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat at the cabin's small dining table, poring over Maxwell's files while Josephine finally rested in one of the bedrooms. The more I read, the clearer the picture became, and the more horrified I felt. The embezzlement scheme had begun nearly 5 years ago, initially with small amounts that gradually increased as the siblings grew bolder, but the true betrayal went deeper. I found evidence that peers had been selling proprietary technology to competitors. Bianca had been using company resources to finance her luxurious lifestyle while falsifying expenses. Xavier, perhaps most damning of all, had been blackmailing employees who discovered financial irregularities, threatening their families if they spoke out. By dawn, my eyes burned from reading, and my heart ached with the weight of discovery. These weren't just white-collar crimes born of greed. This was calculated malice that had hurt countless innocent people. And Maxwell had carried this knowledge alone during his final months, watching his children systematically destroy everything he'd built. I showered and changed just as Josephine was waking. "I need to meet Detective Caldwell at noon," I told her. "But first, I think we should visit Dr. Blackwood." She nodded, setting about making coffee. "The second will. Yes, it's time to understand exactly what Maxwell planned. Blackstone Law Offices wasn't officially open when we arrived. Shortly after 8, but lights glowed behind the frosted glass door. I knocked firmly, and moments later, Dr. Blackwood himself appeared. "Mrs. Whitcroft," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" "No," I replied honestly. "Everything is far from all right. We need to talk about Maxwell's contingency plan." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He stepped aside, ushering us into the hushed interior. "Of course. Please come to my office." Once seated in the familiar leather chairs, I wasted no time. I found Maxwell's evidence. I know what his children have been doing. I also know there's a second will that activates under certain conditions. I need to understand exactly what those conditions are. Dr. Blackwood removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. Maxwell was very specific about this. The second will activates if any of 3 conditions are met. First, if his children violate the terms of the trust by attempting to claim ownership of Halcyon or its contents before the 90-day period expires. Second, if evidence emerges of criminal activity on their part. Or third. He hesitated. "Third," I prompted. "If any harm comes to you," he finished quietly. Maxwell was concerned they might see you as an obstacle, particularly if they suspected you knew about their activities. A chill ran through me. They broke into his safe looking for files. They know I might have evidence against them. Dr. Blackwood's expression grew grave. Then we must move quickly. The inventory they conducted yesterday likely satisfies the first condition. If you're willing to share Maxwell's evidence with Detective Caldwell today, that would satisfy the second. What exactly does the second will stipulate? He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. Perhaps you should read it yourself. The document inside was straightforward but breathtaking in its scope. Whitcroft Industries would pass entirely to me, with Margot Chen as co-executor until I determined the company's future direction. Halcyon Estate and all other properties would become mine outright. The stepchildren would receive modest trust funds, enough to live on but not to maintain. Their extravagant lifestyles, and certainly not enough to start competing businesses. Most surprisingly, Maxwell had established a foundation in my name, dedicated to supporting employees affected by the fraud and investing in ethical business practices. Half of his considerable fortune would fund this endeavor. "This will destroy them," I murmured, setting down the papers. "It will give them what they deserve," Dr. Blackwood corrected. Maxwell was a forgiving man, but even he had limits. They crossed every line, betrayed every trust. The modest inheritances they'll receive are more generous than many would offer, under these circumstances. I thought of the malice I'd seen in their actions, the calculated way they'd undermined their father while plotting to discard me the moment he was gone. When can this will be executed? We can file the paperwork today. Once I submit affidavits confirming the trust violations, along with preliminary evidence of criminal activity, the probate court will invalidate the first will and recognize this as Maxwell's true final testament. How quickly will they know? They'll receive legal notification within 48 hours. However, he hesitated. They may learn of it sooner through their connections in the legal community, which meant I had perhaps 1 day, 2 at most, before the stepchildren realized their inheritance was evaporating. 1 day before they'd fight with everything they had to stop it. "Do it," I said firmly. "File the paperwork. I'll provide Detective Caldwell with the evidence this afternoon." Dr. Blackwood nodded, reaching for his phone. "I'll have my assistant prepare everything immediately. In the meantime, Mrs. Whitcroft, I strongly recommend you don't return to Halcyon until this is resolved. If Maxwell's children realize what's happening, they may not react rationally." The warning was unnecessary. I had no intention of placing myself in their path once they learned the truth. We left Blackstone law offices just as the rest of the staff was arriving for the day. Outside, Ravensdale was coming to life. Shops opening, traffic increasing, people hurrying to work. Normal life continuing, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over the Whitcroft family. "Where to now, Mrs. Ellie?" Josephine asked as we returned to the car. I checked my watch. Still 3 hours before my meeting with Detective Caldwell. "The glass pavilion isn't far from here. Let's go early, get settled, make sure everything's in order." The restaurant wasn't yet open, but lights glowed inside as staff prepared for lunch service. I approached the front door, knocked gently, and was greeted by a young woman in a crisp uniform. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we don't open until 11, she began apologetically. "I understand. I have a meeting here at noon with Detective Caldwell. I'm Eleanor Whitcroft." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Mrs. Whitcroft, of course. Please come in. Mr. Anton mentioned you might arrive early." Mr. Anton, the owner and head chef, had been a friend of Maxwell's for decades. The glass pavilion had been our special place, the site of countless anniversaries and celebrations. It didn't surprise me that Maxwell had ensured it would be available for today's meeting. We were led to a private dining room at the back of the restaurant, a small glass-enclosed space that overlooked a Japanese garden. A silver-haired man rose from the table as we entered. "Mr. Anton," I greeted him, accepting his embrace. "Ellie, my dear." I was heartbroken to hear about Maxwell. Such a terrible loss. He held me at arm's length, studying my face. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected," I replied, the standard answer I'd been giving everyone. He nodded understanding. "The private room is yours for as long as you need it. I've arranged a light lunch to be served at noon." Detective Caldwell called. "To confirm, is there anything else you require?" "Just privacy," I said gratefully. "And perhaps some tea while we wait?" Anton departed with a bow, promising to return with refreshments. Once alone, Josephine and I spread Maxwell's files across the table, organizing them for the detective's review. "We should make copies," Josephine suggested practically. "Just to be safe." She was right. I called Anton back and requested access to a copier. By the time Detective Caldwell arrived precisely at noon, we had duplicated all the key documents and returned the originals to their folders. "Mrs. Whitcroft," he greeted me, his expression somber. "Thank you for meeting me." Up close, I noticed details I'd missed during his visit to Halcyon. The slight shadows under his eyes suggesting long hours, the wedding ring he wore despite being divorced. I recalled Maxwell mentioning this once. The way he scanned the room automatically before sitting, a habit formed by years in law enforcement. "I think I may have found what my husband wanted to show you," I said without preamble, gesturing to the files spread before us. His eyebrows rose. "May I?" For the next hour, Detective Caldwell pored over the evidence, his expression darkening with each page he turned. He asked occasional questions, made notes, and twice stepped outside to make phone calls. When he finally looked up, his face was grim. "This is far worse than I suspected," he said quietly. "Your stepchildren haven't just been embezzling funds, they've been systematically undermining the company, threatening employees, falsifying reports to shareholders. There's enough here for multiple federal charges." "What happens now?" I asked. "I need to take these files, get warrants, coordinate with the Financial Crimes Division." He hesitated. "Mrs. Whitcroft, I have to ask, did you know about any of this before your husband's death?" "No," I answered truthfully. "Maxwell protected me from it. I only discovered the evidence yesterday." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Where are you staying? Not at Halcyon, I hope." "We've found somewhere temporary, somewhere safe." "Good. Keep it that way." He gathered the files carefully. "Once I file these reports, things will move quickly. Your stepchildren will almost certainly be arrested within the next 24 to 48 hours. The reality of what was happening finally hit me fully. Maxwell's children, people I had tried to love for over 2 decades, would soon be facing criminal charges, public disgrace, perhaps even prison. Despite everything they'd done, the thought brought me no joy. "What if they run?" I asked suddenly. Caldwell's expression hardened. "We'll have officers watching them. But just to be safe, I'm going to expedite this. The evidence is too damning to wait." After he left, Anton brought fresh tea and sat with us briefly, reminiscing about Maxwell. "He was here just weeks before he passed," he told me. "Alone, which was unusual. He sat at your regular table, ordered champagne, and drank a toast to an empty chair. When I asked if everything was all right, he just smiled and said he was celebrating a decision he'd finally made." My throat tightened. "Did he say what decision?" Anton shook his head. "Only that it had been a long time coming, and that he hoped you would understand when the time came." The final pieces were falling into place. Maxwell had known he was running out of time. The champagne toast had been his private farewell to our life together, his acknowledgement that he was setting events in motion that would change everything. As we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Blackwood. "Papers filed. Second will officially in probate. First will invalidated. Stepchildren notified." It had begun. There was no turning back now. We returned to the cabin. By late afternoon, I felt exhausted, yet strangely euphoric. as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. For the first time since Maxwell's death, I allowed myself to think beyond grief, beyond survival, to what might come next. "I'm going to walk by the lake," I told Josephine. "Clear my head a bit." The shoreline was peaceful, the water reflecting, the golden late afternoon sun. I found a weathered bench and sat, watching birds swoop and skim over the surface. In the distance, a small sailboat glided silently, its white sail bright against the darkening trees on the opposite shore. I thought of Maxwell, not as I'd last seen him, pale and still in his casket, but vibrant and alive, laughing as we sailed on a lake much like this one years ago. I remembered his hands, strong and sure on the tiller, his voice calling instructions, over the wind, his smile when I managed to set the sail correctly after multiple failed attempts. "You never give up," he'd said admiringly. "That's what I love about you, Ellie. You keep trying until you get it right." I hadn't given up then, and I wouldn't give up now. Maxwell had trusted me to finish what he'd started, to expose the truth, to reclaim what was rightfully ours, to ensure justice was served. I would honor that trust, no matter what came next. The peaceful moment was shattered by the harsh ring of my phone. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "How dare you?" Piers's voice vibrated with cold fury. "We've just been informed that you've somehow manipulated the courts into invalidating Father's will. This is elder abuse, coercion, and fraud, and we will fight it with everything we have." I remained silent, letting him continue. "Did you really think you could steal our inheritance, our birthright? You were nothing before you met our father. Nothing. And that's exactly what you'll be when we're finished with you." Finally, I spoke. "Did Maxwell ever tell you about the restructuring plan that saved Whitcroft Industries 15 years ago?" The question clearly threw him. "What does that have to do with anything?" "I created that plan, Piers. I identified the accounting errors that were bleeding the company dry. I developed the strategy that salvaged operations and saved thousands of jobs." I let that sink in. "Your father gave me credit, but I was the one who saved your birthright, while you were still partying your way through business school." "You're lying," he spat, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Ask Margot Chen if you don't believe me. She has the original documents with my analysis, my recommendations, my signature." I paused. "But that's the least of your concerns. Right now, Detective Caldwell has Maxwell's files, all of them. The embezzlement, the fraud, the threats against employees. It's over, Piers." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of his breathing. "If you're smart," I continued calmly, "you'll contact a criminal defense attorney immediately. If you run, it will only make things worse." "You've destroyed this family," he said finally, his voice shaking with rage. "Everything Father built, everything he wanted for us. You've perverted it all. No, Piers, you did that when you decided to steal from your father's company, threaten his employees, and betray his trust. You did that when you plotted to throw me out of my home the moment he was buried." I took a deep breath. "Maxwell gave you everything. Love, opportunity, second chances. And this is how you repaid him." He hung up without another word. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then turned it off completely. There would be more calls, from Bianca, from Xavier, from lawyers. None of them mattered now. The wheels of justice were turning, and nothing they could say would change what was coming. When I returned to the cabin, Josephine was watching the local news with wide eyes. "Mrs. Ellie," she said urgently, "you need to see this." The screen showed Whitcroft Industries headquarters surrounded by police vehicles. The reporter's voice was tense with excitement. "A major development in what appears to be a wide-ranging fraud investigation. Sources tell us federal agents have seized computers and files from multiple offices. 3 executives, including CEO Piers Whitcroft, have been taken in for questioning. The camera panned to show Piers being escorted from the building, his face a mask of cold fury. Bianca was visible in the background, arguing heatedly with a female agent. No sign of Xavier. "That was fast," I murmured. "Detective Caldwell must have moved immediately," Josephine agreed. "But Mrs. Ellie, there's something else. They mentioned a possible connection to Mr. Maxwell's death." My blood ran cold. "What connection?" She increased the volume as the reporter continued. "Sources close to the investigation suggest authorities are re-examining the circumstances of Maxwell Whitcroft's death last month. Initially ruled as natural causes, questions have emerged about possible contributing factors, including extreme stress related to the discovery of the alleged fraud scheme. It wasn't quite an accusation of murder, but it was close. Had they deliberately pushed Maxwell to his breaking point, knowing his heart condition made him vulnerable? Had they actually hoped the stress would kill him? The thought was almost too painful to contemplate. Yet it aligned with their callous behavior, their impatience to claim their inheritance, their utter lack of grief for the man who had given them everything. My phone, which I'd turned back on to check messages, chimed with a text from Detective Caldwell. "Warrants executed. P&B in custody. X missing. Stay where you are until we locate him." Xavier was unaccounted for. The most volatile of the BAO, 3, the one with the least to lose. A new worry gnawed at me. Would he come looking for revenge? "We should leave," Josephine suggested, reading my expression. "Go somewhere else just to be safe." I considered it briefly, then shook my head. "No, I'm done running. If Xavier wants to find me, let him come. I have nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of." She looked unconvinced but didn't argue. Instead, she checked the locks on the doors and windows, drew the curtains, and positioned herself where she could watch the approach to the cabin. Night fell, bringing with it a gentle rain that pattered against the roof and blurred the view through the windows. We ate a simple dinner, watching the news for updates. The Whitcroft scandal was now the lead story. Details emerging about the scope of the fraud, the amount stolen, the people harmed. I found myself thinking of the employees whose retirement funds had been compromised, the families who had suffered, because of the stepchildren's greed. Maxwell's second will had established the foundation to help these people, but would it be enough? Could money truly repair the damage done? My contemplation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the curtained windows as a vehicle pulled up outside. Josephine immediately moved to stand beside me, her posture protective. "Did anyone know we were here?" "Only Dr. Blackwood and Detective Caldwell," I whispered. "And I didn't give them the exact address." We waited in tense silence. A car door slammed. Footsteps approached the cabin, then stopped. A moment later, a gentle knock at the door. "Mrs. Whitcroft?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "This is Agent Kimura with the FBI. Detective Caldwell sent me to check on you." I exchanged glances with Josephine. "Ask for identification," she mouthed. "Please slide your credentials under the door," I called. A moment later, an FBI badge appeared in the narrow gap beneath the door. It looked official, but I remained cautious. "I'm going to call Detective Caldwell to confirm," I said, reaching for my phone. "Of course," the voice replied. "That's standard procedure." I dialed Caldwell's number, and he answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Whitcroft, is everything all right?" "There's an Agent Kimura at my door. Did you send her?" "Yes," he confirmed immediately. "Agent Sarah Kimura. She's been assigned to your protection until we locate Xavier Whitcroft. You can trust her." Reassured, I opened the door to reveal a petite Asian woman in a dark suit, her expression professional, but kind. "Mrs. Whitcroft," she greeted me. "I apologize for startling you. May I come in?" Once inside, Agent Kimura explained the situation. Xavier Whitcroft disappeared shortly before the warrants were executed. His passport has been flagged, accounts frozen, but he has connections that might help him evade capture temporarily. Given the circumstances, we're concerned he might attempt to contact you. You think he's dangerous? I asked. Her expression was carefully neutral. We consider him motivated and potentially desperate. It's standard procedure to offer protection in cases like this. Standard procedure or not, the implication was clear. Xavier might blame me for the collapse of his world, might seek retribution. The stepson who had never accepted me, who had taken my dog, who had participated in a scheme to defraud his own father. What might he be capable of now, with nothing left to lose? I'll stay outside in my vehicle tonight, Agent Kimura continued. Tomorrow, we'll assess whether you should be moved to a more secure location. I nodded, suddenly too tired to argue. The events of the day, meeting with Dr. Blackwood, sharing evidence with Detective Caldwell, watching the Stepchildren's arrest on television, had drained me completely. All I wanted was sleep, a temporary escape from the storm swirling around me. As I prepared for bed, I found myself staring at the wedding ring I still wore. Maxwell had placed it on my finger 23 years ago, promising to love and protect me always. In a way, he was still keeping that promise, reaching from beyond the grave to ensure I would be safe, respected, provided for. I'm doing what you asked, I whispered to his memory. I'm seeing this through to the end, but I wish you were here. I wish we could face this together. There was no answer, of course, just the sound of rain against the windows and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight in the war Maxwell had begun. Outside, Agent Kimura settled into her vigilance. Inside, I finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. The first, truly restful night since Maxwell's death. I didn't know then that the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Morning arrived with startling brightness, sunlight streaming through the cabin windows as though the previous day's storms had never happened. Agent Kimura was already awake. When I emerged from the bedroom, looking remarkably alert for someone who had spent the night in a car. Coffee? She offered, holding up a cardboard tray with 2 cups from a local cafe. I accepted gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm container. Any news? Her expression shifted subtly. Piers and Bianca Whitcroft were formally charged last night. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Bail was denied due to flight risk. And Xavier? Still unaccounted for, but we have leads. She sipped her coffee, then added, Detective Caldwell asked me to bring you to his office this morning. There are some new developments he wants to discuss in person. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What kind of developments? It's not my place to say, Mrs. Whitcroft, but it's important. Josephine appeared from the kitchen, immediately sensing the tension. Should I come along? Agent Kimura considered this. It might be better if you stayed here. We're trying to keep Mrs. Whitcroft's movements as low profile as possible. I squeezed Josephine's hand reassuringly. I'll be fine. Agent Kimura will take good care of me. She didn't look convinced, but nodded reluctantly. Call me if you need anything. The drive to the Ravensdale Police Department was tense with unspoken questions. Agent Kimura maintained professional silence, her attention divided between the road and our surroundings, constantly scanning for potential threats. I found myself doing the same, eyeing each passing vehicle with suspicion, wondering if Xavier might be behind any of them. Has this happened before? I asked suddenly. Family members turning on each other over inheritance? Agent Kimura's lips curved in a humorless smile. More often than you'd think. Money changes people. Or rather, it reveals who they've always been. The police station was a modern building of glass and steel, surprisingly elegant for a municipal structure. Inside, Detective Caldwell waited in the lobby, his expression grave. Mrs. Whitcroft, thank you for coming. He gestured toward a hallway. Let's talk in my office. I followed him to a small but neat room with windows overlooking a courtyard garden. Awards and family photographs adorned the walls, evidence of a life well lived outside the job. He indicated a chair, then closed the door behind Agent Kimura, who positioned herself unobtrusively against the wall. We've been working through the night, Caldwell began, analyzing the evidence you provided. What we've found goes beyond even what we initially suspected. I waited, steeling myself for whatever was coming. Your stepchildren didn't just embezzle funds, he continued. They were systematically destroying Whitcroft Industries from within, tanking stock values, alienating key clients, driving away talented employees, all while extracting maximum profit for themselves before the collapse. But why? I asked, genuinely puzzled. If they inherited the company, why destroy it? Because they weren't planning to inherit it as a going concern. He opened a folder and pushed a document across the desk. They had buyers lined up, competitors who wanted Whitcroft's patents, client lists, and proprietary technology. The plan was to sell off the valuable assets after Maxwell's death, then let the shell of the company collapse, leaving employees and smaller shareholders with nothing. I scanned the document, a draft agreement between Piers Whitcroft and Axiom Industries, a notorious corporate raider known for dismantling acquired companies. The date caught my eye. 3 months before Maxwell's death. They knew, I whispered. They had this planned well before he died. Caldwell nodded grimly. And there's more. We found communication suggesting they were actively working to accelerate your husband's death. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What exactly does that mean? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They were aware of his heart condition. There's evidence they deliberately created stressful situations, withheld medication, even tampered with his health monitoring devices to prevent early warning of cardiac issues. I struggled to find words. That's murder. It's complicated legally. They didn't directly cause his death, but they created conditions they knew could lead to it, hoping nature would take its course. His expression hardened. But yes, morally speaking, it's murder. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this new level of betrayal. Maxwell had known, or at least suspected, what they were doing. It was there in his video message, in the contingency plans he'd created. Yet even knowing they were actively hastening his death, he'd still offered them one last chance at redemption through the first will. His capacity for forgiveness, for hope that his children might finally do the right thing, was both beautiful and heartbreaking. There's something else, Caldwell said, interrupting my thoughts. Something that might explain Xavier's disappearance. He placed another document before me. It appeared to be a medical report, though most of the technical language was beyond my understanding. What am I looking at? DNA test results, he replied. Found among your husband's files. As part of his investigation, Maxwell apparently ordered comparative testing between himself and all 3 of his children. I looked up sharply. And? Piers and Bianca are biologically his. Xavier is not. The revelation struck me with physical force. Xavier, the youngest, the most troubled, the one who had always seemed the least like Maxwell in temperament and character. Not his biological son. Does Xavier know? I asked. We believe so. There were emails from Maxwell confronting his ex-wife about the deception, dated just weeks before his death. It appears she confirmed the truth, but begged him not to tell Xavier. Maxwell agreed to keep the secret temporarily, but insisted on addressing it after completing his investigation into the company fraud. So, Xavier has known for weeks that he's not a Whitcroft, I murmured, piecing it together. Yet he still participated in the fraud, still helped plot against his father, against the man who raised him as his own for 30 years. Some bonds go beyond biology, Agent Kimura observed quietly from her position by the wall. And some betrayals cut deeper because of it. She was right. Regardless of blood, Maxwell had been Xavier's father in every way that mattered, had raised him, educated him, given him opportunities, forgiven his mistakes. That Xavier could repay that love with such calculated malice seemed almost incomprehensible. Almost. I thought of the years I'd spent trying to connect with Xavier, to build some bridge between us. His coldness, his resentment, his occasional flashes of genuine hatred. I'd attributed it to jealousy, to his fear that I was replacing his mother in Maxwell's affections. But perhaps there had been something deeper at work, some unconscious knowledge of his difference, his separateness from the Whitcroft line. "We think this is why Xavier ran," Caldwell continued. "The fraud charges are serious, but with the right lawyers, he might have faced minimal jail time. But the DNA results change everything. He's not legally entitled to any Whitcroft inheritance. Everything he's received over the years, allowances, property, positions in the company, it was all built on a lie. Does the public know?" I asked, suddenly concerned for Xavier despite everything. Being exposed this way would destroy whatever remained of his identity. "Not yet. It's relevant to the investigation, but not something we'd release to the media." Caldwell hesitated. "However, it will likely come out during legal proceedings." I nodded, feeling oddly hollow. Another secret Maxwell had carried alone. Another burden he'd shouldered to protect others, even those who didn't deserve protection. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Two reasons," Caldwell replied. "First, it's information you have a right to know as Maxwell's widow and the new head of Whitcroft Industries. Second, it potentially makes Xavier even more dangerous. A man who's lost not just his freedom and fortune, but his very identity might be capable of desperate actions." The implication was clear. Xavier might blame me for everything: the discovery of the fraud, the activation of the second will, perhaps even the revelation of his true parentage. "You think he'll come after me?" "It's a possibility we have to consider," Agent Kimura interjected. "That's why we're recommending you remain under protection until he's apprehended." I thought of Halcyon Estate sitting empty, of the Stepchildren, now in custody, of Xavier somewhere out there, perhaps watching, waiting. A wave of determination rose within me. "I want to go home," I said firmly. Both Caldwell and Kimura looked startled. "To Halcyon?" Caldwell clarified. "Mrs. Whitcroft, that might not be advisable right now." "It's the last place Xavier would expect me to be," I argued. "He'd assume I'm in hiding. Besides, the second will has been activated, hasn't it? Halcyon is legally mine now." "Yes, but then I'm going home," I insisted, standing to emphasize my point. "With appropriate security measures, of course. Agent Kimura can stay with me if needed, but I'm done hiding. Done being driven from my own life by the Whitcroft children." They exchanged glances, clearly reluctant but recognizing my determination. "We can arrange a security team," Kimura conceded finally. "But you should understand, Mrs. Whitcroft, this isn't just about physical protection. The media has gotten hold of this story. Reporters will be everywhere. This is going to be very public, very messy." I thought of the quiet, dignified life Maxwell and I had built, the charity work, the small dinner parties, the private moments away from his children's drama. That life was gone now, replaced by something I could barely imagine. Headlines, courthouse steps, photographers calling my name. "I understand," I said quietly, "but I need to face this head on." Maxwell spent months gathering evidence, creating contingency plans, trying to protect both the company and me. The least I can do is stand firmly in the path he cleared. "Detective?" Caldwell studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll coordinate with local patrol units to increase surveillance around Halcyon. Agent Kimura will stay with you as personal protection. And Mrs. Whitcroft? If Xavier contacts you in any way, phone, email, text, let us know immediately. The drive to Halcyon felt surreal, like returning to a familiar dream that had somehow shifted into nightmare territory. The estate looked exactly as I'd left. Its elegant facade offering no hint of the drama that had unfolded in recent days. Only the absence of the stepchildren's expensive cars in the driveway suggested anything had changed. As we approached the front entrance, Agent Kimura suddenly tensed, raising one hand to stop me. "The door," she said quietly. "It's ajar." I froze, eyes fixed on the heavy oak door that stood slightly open. Had I left it that way when we fled? No, Josephine would never have allowed such a lapse in security. "Stay in the car," Kimura instructed, her voice calm but authoritative. "Lock the doors. I'm going to check it out." She drew her weapon and approached the house cautiously, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone trained for precisely such situations. I watched, heart pounding, as she disappeared inside. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. I kept my eyes fixed on the doorway, jumping at every shadow, every rustle of leaves in the garden. Just as I was about to disobey orders and follow her in, Kimura reappeared. "All clear," she called, holstering her weapon. "But someone's definitely been here." I hurried up the steps. "What do you mean?" "Nothing obvious at first glance. No ransacking, no major damage. But things have been moved, searched, professionally. Someone was looking for something specific." We entered the foyer together, and immediately I saw what she meant. To a casual observer, everything appeared normal. But I knew this house intimately. The crystal vase on the entry table had been shifted slightly. The drawer of the antique secretary desk was closed, but not completely flush as I always left it. Small details, almost imperceptible, but enough to raise alarm. "Xavier?" I wondered, aloud. "Possibly, or someone working for him." Kimura moved through the rooms methodically, checking each space before allowing me to enter. Whatever they were looking for, they were careful not to leave obvious traces. The study showed the most disturbance, books slightly out of alignment. On shelves, the desk drawers not quite closed properly, the rug at a slightly different angle than usual. Maxwell's computer was still there, but I had no doubt someone had attempted to access it. They were looking for the evidence, I realized. The files Maxwell collected, which are now safely with the FBI, Kimura noted. Too late for them to disappear that trail. We continued through the house, finding similar subtle signs of intrusion in the master bedroom, particularly around Maxwell's closet where the damaged safe still hung open and empty. "I should call Josephine," I said, reaching for my phone. "Let her know where I am." "Good idea, but don't tell her to come here yet, not until we've had a full security sweep." I nodded, dialing the number. Josephine answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. "Mrs. Ellie, are you all right?" What did the detective want? "I'm fine, Joe," I assured her. "I'm at Halcyon with Agent Kimura. There's a lot to explain, but the short version is that I've decided to stay here. The house is legally mine now. The second will has been activated." "Thank goodness," she breathed. "But Mrs. Ellie, is it safe? With Xavier still out there?" "We're setting up security. Agent Kimura is with me, and Detective Caldwell is arranging additional patrols." I hesitated, then added, "Someone's been in the house, Joe, looking for something." "The files," she said immediately. "The evidence against them." "That's what we think. Nothing's missing that I can see, just disturbed." I glanced around the bedroom, noting more signs now that I was looking carefully. The jewelry box, slightly ajar, the bedside table drawer not fully closed. "I'll call you later about coming back. For now, stay where you are. It's safer." After hanging up, I turned to find Kimura watching me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You're handling this remarkably well," she observed. "Most people would be falling apart under these circumstances." I considered this. Perhaps I should be more frightened, more overwhelmed. But something had shifted inside me since finding Maxwell's hidden files, since reading his final letter, since understanding the full scope of what he'd been facing alone. "My husband spent months gathering evidence against his own children," I said quietly. "He knew they were likely hastening his death. Yet he still offered them one last chance at redemption. If he could face that with courage, I can face this." Kimura nodded respectfully. "Still, we should establish some safety protocols. Don't answer the door unless you're expecting someone. Keep curtains drawn after dark. Maintain regular check-ins with Detective Caldwell or myself." "Of course." "And Mrs. Whitcroft, I recommend you don't stay here alone for the foreseeable future. Even with security measures, it's a big house with a lot of entry points." I thought of Josephine, of her unwavering loyalty over the years. "I won't be alone. Josephine will stay with me once you've cleared the house." A discreet chirp from Kimura's phone interrupted us. She glanced at the screen, her expression changing subtly. "What is it?" I asked. "Local police just reported a sighting of Xavier Whitcroft," she replied, already texting a response. "At the marina, about 30 minutes ago." The marina, where Margot Chen lived aboard her houseboat. My blood ran cold. "Margot," I gasped. "He might be going after her." Kimura was already dialing, her movements swift and precise. "This is Agent Kimura. I need immediate response to Ravensdale Marina, houseboat section. Possible hostile situation involving Xavier Whitcroft." She listened briefly. "Yes, inform local PD as well. And get me any marina security footage from the last hour." She hung up, then immediately dialed another number. "Mrs. Chen isn't answering," she reported after several rings. "Could be nothing. She might be in meetings, away from her phone. But we need to check." "I'm coming with you," I said, already moving toward the door. "Mrs. Whitcroft, that's not advisable. If Xavier is there—" "Margot is in danger because of me," I interrupted. "Because she supported Maxwell. Because she's helping me. I'm not sitting here safely while he might hurt her." Kimura looked like she wanted to argue further, but apparently recognized the determination in my face. "Stay behind me at all times," she conceded reluctantly. "And if I tell you to get down or run, you do it immediately. No questions, no hesitation." Agreed. We drove to the marina with urgent speed, Kimura occasionally speaking into her radio, coordinating with other agents and local police. I sat rigid with worry, mentally calculating how long it would take to reach Margot's houseboat, whether Xavier might already be there, what he might do if confronted. The marina came into view, a forest of white masts and gleaming vessels bobbing, gently in the afternoon sun, so peaceful, so at odds with the panic churning inside me. Kimura parked near the entrance, where 2 police cruisers already waited. "Stay in the car until I signal," she instructed firmly, then exited to confer with the officers. I watched through the windshield as they spoke, gesturing toward the private dock area where Margot's houseboat was moored. One officer pointed to security footage on a tablet, Kimura leaning in to study it intently. After what seemed an eternity, she returned to the car. "Security cameras show Xavier arriving about 40 minutes ago," she reported. "He approached the autonomy, spoke briefly with someone, presumably Mrs. Chen, then was allowed aboard. No signs of force or coercion, at least initially. So he's still there? No one has been recorded leaving. We're setting up a perimeter now. Officers at all exit points from the marina, plus harbor patrol on the water side." "What's the plan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Standard protocol would be to establish communication, attempt negotiation, determine if hostages are involved." She studied me for a moment. However, this might be an opportunity to use your connection. Xavier might respond differently to you than to law enforcement. I blinked in surprise. You want me to talk to him? Not directly. Not yet, but perhaps a phone call with officers listening in. If he answers, we gain information about the situation inside. If Mrs. Chen answers, even better. It made sense, though the thought of speaking to Xavier after everything I'd learned sent ice through my veins. Still, if it could help Margot. I'll do it, I said. What should I say? Keep it simple. Ask if he's with Margot if everything's okay. Try to get a sense of his emotional state, his intentions. Don't antagonize him or mention the charges. I nodded, pulling out my phone and dialing Margot's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as I was about to give up, someone answered. Ellie. Xavier's voice, surprisingly calm. I was wondering when you'd call. I swallowed hard, acutely aware of Kimura listening intently beside me. Xavier, is Margot with you? She's here, perfectly safe. We're having a fascinating conversation about loyalty, about truth, about who really belongs in the Whitcroft family. His tone was almost conversational, but with an undercurrent of something darker. Would you like to join us? Kimura shook, her head urgently. Xavier, why don't you and Margot come to me instead? I suggested, trying to sound casual. We could talk somewhere more comfortable. He laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. More comfortable than surrounded by police? I can see them from the window, Ellie. Not very subtle, are they? My heart sank. If he knew he was surrounded, the situation could escalate quickly. No one wants anyone to get hurt, I said carefully. Margot has nothing to do with this. Why don't you let her go, and then you and I can talk? Let her go? He sounded genuinely puzzled. Ellie, you misunderstand. Margot isn't a hostage. She's a willing participant in this conversation. In fact, she's the one who invited me aboard. I glanced at Kimura, who looked as confused as I felt. May I speak with her, please? A moment of silence, then Margot's voice came on the line. Ellie, I'm fine. Xavier and I are simply clearing up some misunderstandings. Margot, are you sure you're okay? I pressed. You're not under any duress? None whatsoever. In fact, I suggested Xavier come here. We have matters to discuss that concern both of us. Her voice was steady, professional, the same tone she used in board meetings. Perhaps you should join us. There are things you need to know as well. Kimura was watching me intently, clearly trying to assess whether Margot was speaking freely or under coercion. What kind of things? I asked cautiously. Things Maxwell kept from all of us, Margot replied, including you. Please, Ellie, come alone. This needs to be a private conversation. The line went dead. She's either under extreme duress or voluntarily working with him, Kimura said immediately. Either way, you're not going anywhere near that boat. I stared at the phone in my hand, replaying Margot's words. She had sounded calm, clear-headed, not like a woman being held at gunpoint. And what had she meant about Maxwell keeping things from all of us? Something's not right, I murmured. Margot has been nothing but supportive since Maxwell's death. Why would she suddenly ally with Xavier? People surprise you, Kimura replied grimly, especially when money and power are involved. But that explanation didn't sit right with me. Margot had her own fortune, her own power. She'd been Maxwell's trusted partner for decades, had known about his contingency plans, had helped safeguard his evidence. Unless there was evidence against her as well? The thought hit me with stunning force. What if Margot had been involved in the fraud? What if Maxwell had discovered her participation along with his children's? No, that made no sense. He'd trusted her with his most careful plans, had named her co-executor in the second will. I need to go to the boat, I said suddenly. Kimura, looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Absolutely not. We have trained negotiators on the way, tactical teams positioning. This is not a situation for civilians. Something else is happening here, I insisted. Margot wouldn't betray Maxwell, and despite everything, I don't believe Xavier would hurt her. There's another explanation. Even if you're right, it's too dangerous. Xavier is unpredictable, possibly desperate. And we can't dismiss the possibility that Margot is being coerced, regardless of how she sounds. I stared across the marina toward the private dock where the Autonomy was moored, just visible past a row of sailboats. What was happening on that houseboat? What secrets could be so important that Margot would risk her safety, and mine, to reveal them? My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. 30 minutes, Ellie. Come alone or we leave with the truth. Your choice. I showed the message to Kimura, who immediately began coordinating with the other officers, discussing approach options, possible sniper positions, evacuation routes for nearby vessels. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over puzzles pieces that still didn't fit. Xavier's surprising calm, Margot's willing participation, the insistence that Maxwell had kept secrets from all of us. What if the biggest revelation was yet to come? Decision crystallized within me with sudden clarity. Whatever was happening on that houseboat, whatever truths Margot and Xavier claimed to possess, I needed to hear them firsthand. Not filtered through police reports or legal proceedings, but directly, raw and unvarnished. I'm going, I told Agent Kimura, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Her expression hardened. Mrs. Whitcroft, I cannot allow that. It's my job. To keep you safe. And you will. You can position officers nearby, have snipers covering the boat, whatever security measures you need. But I'm walking onto that vessel alone, as requested. I met her gaze steadily. This isn't just about Xavier or legal charges anymore. There's something else happening here, something Maxwell kept hidden. I need to know what it is. Kimura studied me for a long moment, clearly weighing her professional responsibilities against my determination. Finally, she sighed. If I can't stop you, we do this my way. You'll wear a wire. We'll have tactical teams positioned to intervene at the first sign of danger. You establish a safety word, something you can casually mention if you feel threatened. Moonlight, I said immediately, thinking of the Moonlight Sonata, the password to Maxwell's files. If I say anything about Moonlight, it means I need help. She nodded. You get 20 minutes, not 30, not 25. At minute 21, we come in regardless of the situation. Understood? Understood. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of technical preparations. A small microphone was clipped discreetly to my collar, tested and confirmed operational. Tactical officers moved into position, establishing clear sight lines to the Autonomy while remaining hidden from its occupants. Kimura gave me final instructions, her voice tense with professional concern. Remember, Mrs. Whitcroft, your only job is to gather information and stay safe. Don't confront, don't accuse, don't escalate. If Xavier becomes agitated, use calming language. If you feel threatened in any way, use the code word. I nodded, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Then, with a final deep breath, I began walking toward Margot's houseboat. The marina was unnervingly quiet. Most of the neighboring vessels apparently evacuated during the tactical preparations. My footsteps echoed on the wooden dock, each step bringing me closer to answers I both craved and feared. The Autonomy looked peaceful in the afternoon sun, its sleek lines and polished exterior offering no hint of the drama unfolding within. As I approached, the main cabin door opened, and Margot herself appeared on deck. Ellie, she called, her voice carrying clearly across the water. Thank you for coming. Please join us. No sign of coercion, no hint of fear in her manner. She stood confidently, one hand casually resting on the railing, as composed as she'd been at countless board meetings over the years. I stepped aboard, carefully, hyper-aware of the microphone at my collar, of the tactical teams watching from concealed positions, of the 20-minute countdown that had already begun. Margot led me into the main cabin, a spacious area furnished with the same minimalist elegance that characterized everything in her life. Xavier sat in an armchair by the window, a glass of what appeared to be scotch in his hand. He looked up. As I entered, his expression surprisingly calm, almost resigned. "Ellie," he acknowledged without rising. "Right on time." "Xavier," I replied neutrally, taking the seat Margot indicated. "You wanted to talk. I'm here." He studied me for a moment, then laughed softly. "You're wearing a wire, aren't you? Of course you are. The police wouldn't let you come otherwise." I didn't deny it. "There's no need for games, Xavier. What's this about? What truth do you and Margot share that's so important?" Instead of answering directly, he glanced at Margot, who had taken a seat across from me. "Show her," he said simply. Margot reached for a leather portfolio on the coffee table between us. From it, she withdrew a thick document bound in blue legal paper. "Maxwell's original will," she explained, pushing it toward me. "The one he wrote 5 years ago, before he discovered the fraud, before he created the contingency plans." I frowned, not understanding the significance. "How does this matter now? The second will has been activated. This document is void." "Look at the inheritance provisions," Margot instructed. "Page 14, specifically." Puzzled, I flipped to the indicated page and began reading. The legal language was dense, but the gist was clear. Upon Maxwell's death, Whitcroft Industries would be divided among his 3 children, and Margot Chen, who would receive a 30% stake. I looked up, startled. "You were a beneficiary? Maxwell never mentioned this." "Because he changed it," Margot replied calmly. "When he created the second will, the one currently in effect, he removed me as a beneficiary and transferred my share to you instead." The implications began to take shape in my mind. So, with the fraud exposed and the children disinherited, I lost what would have been mine, Margot finished. 30% of a multi-billion-dollar company, gone, given to you instead. The tension in the room thickened. I glanced at Xavier, who was watching our exchange with an odd expression. Not anger, but something closer to vindication. "That doesn't explain why Xavier is here," I said carefully, "or why you'd risk harboring a fugitive." Xavier leaned forward. "I'm here because Margot contacted me, because she found something in Maxwell's private files that concerns both of us, something he never intended anyone to discover." "What?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. Margot opened the portfolio again, this time removing a sealed envelope. This was in Maxwell's personal safe at the office, the one only he had access to. I found it when the FBI allowed me in to retrieve company documents yesterday. She handed it to me. The envelope was addressed simply, "In the event of my death, to be destroyed unopened." "You broke Maxwell's explicit instructions," I observed, not taking it. "Yes," she admitted without remorse. "Because I was looking for an explanation. Why would Maxwell cut me out of his will after promising me a significant stake for decades? We built that company together, Ellie. I deserved that share." I still didn't understand the connection to Xavier. "And this letter explains it?" "Read it," Xavier said quietly. "Read it and understand why everything happened the way it did." With a growing sense of trepidation, I took the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a single page of Maxwell's distinctive handwriting, dated just 6 months earlier. "My dearest Margot," it began. "If you're reading this, I have failed in my final duty, to destroy this letter and the truth it contains. Some secrets should remain buried, not out of shame but out of kindness. Yet I find myself unable to destroy this last connection to a past both beautiful and painful. I glanced up briefly, but Margot nodded for me to continue. 30 years ago, we made a decision that altered 3 lives forever. We agreed it was for the best, that Xavier would have a more stable life as Catherine's son, with me as his father, than if the truth were known. Your career was just beginning. A child would have derailed everything you'd worked for. I understood your choice and respected it, even as it broke my heart to watch our son grow up never knowing you were his mother. The words blurred before my eyes. Xavier, Margot, and Maxwell's biological son? The implications cascaded through my mind, rewriting everything I thought I knew about the Whitcroft family. Xavier spoke into my shocked silence. Now you understand. I'm not a Whitcroft by blood, but I'm not an imposter either. I'm Maxwell's son, his only biological child. Piers and Bianca are my half-siblings through my mother, or the woman I thought was my mother. I looked at Margot, who met my gaze, unflinchingly. You knew? All these years? Of course I knew, she replied evenly. I made the choice to give him up. Maxwell and Catherine's marriage was already failing. She'd had affairs. Piers and Bianca had different fathers, though Maxwell raised them as his own. When she became pregnant with another man's child around the same time I was pregnant with Maxwell's, it created a convenient fiction. Catherine could claim Xavier as hers, giving her marriage to Maxwell a final chance, while I could continue, my career unimpeded. The coldness in her voice chilled me. How could anyone speak of their child so dispassionately? Why reveal this now? I asked, directing my question to both of them. What does this change? Everything, Xavier said bitterly. It changes everything. I grew up believing Catherine was my mother, believing I was a Whitcroft by blood. Then, last month, Maxwell confronted me with DNA results showing I wasn't his son, or so I thought. He never told me the whole truth. He let me believe I was nothing to him, a complete imposter. He was protecting Margot, I realized aloud, honoring the agreement they made 30 years ago. At my expense, Xavier snapped. Do you have any idea what it did to me? Finding out my entire identity was a lie? I joined Piers and Bianca in their scheme because I felt I had nothing left to lose, that if I wasn't a real Whitcroft, I might as well take what I could from the family that had deceived me. I turned back to Margot. And you? What do you gain from revealing this now? Leverage, she replied simply. The second will gives you control of Whitcroft Industries. I want my 30% restored. In exchange, this information stays private. The mercenary calculation behind her words stunned me. This was the woman Maxwell had trusted completely, had made his partner in business, and the guardian of his contingency plans. Yet here she was, using their secret child as a bargaining chip for financial gain. Blackmail, I said flatly. That's what this is. She shrugged elegantly. Business. I spent 30 years helping build that company. I've earned my share. And what about Xavier? I asked. What does he get from this arrangement? He's still facing criminal charges. A better plea deal, Xavier answered. Margot has connections in the Justice Department. With her help, I can argue I was manipulated by Piers and Bianca after the emotional trauma of the DNA revelation. I might avoid prison entirely. I sat back, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd learned. Maxwell had been keeping secrets from everyone, from his children, from me, perhaps even from himself. He'd created elaborate contingency plans to protect his company and ensure justice, yet had maintained this fundamental deception at the core of his family. 20 minutes are almost up, Margot observed calmly. Your police escort will be getting anxious. What's it going to be, Ellie? Do we have a deal? My silence and help with Xavier's case in exchange for my rightful share of the company? I looked at the letter in my hands, at the pain and regret evident in Maxwell's handwriting, then at Xavier, the son he'd raised without claiming, and Margot, the trusted partner who'd abandoned her child for career advancement. My decision was sudden and absolute. No, I said firmly, no deal. Margot's composed facade cracked slightly. You're not thinking clearly. This information would create a media frenzy. The noble Maxwell Whitcroft, carrying on an affair with his business partner, raising their secret love child while lying to everyone, including his wife. Your pristine image of him would be destroyed in the public eye. I don't care, I replied. Truthfully, I loved Maxwell, the real Maxwell, not some idealized version. His flaws, his mistakes, his secrets, they were all part of who he was. Nothing you can reveal will change that. I turned to Xavier. As for you, you're still Maxwell's son, whether by blood or by choice. He raised you, educated you, gave you every opportunity, and you repaid that love with betrayal. The fact that he's your biological father only makes your actions more contemptible. Xavier flinched as if I'd struck him. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You felt hurt and betrayed when you learned part of the truth. That's natural, but you chose to respond by destroying everything Maxwell built by actively contributing to conditions that hastened his death. Those weren't the actions of a wounded son. They were the actions of a vindictive, entitled man who believed the world owed him something. I stood, gathering the letter and the original will. I'm taking these with me. You're welcome to tell your story to whoever will listen. Maybe it will help your legal case, Xavier. Maybe it will tarnish Maxwell's memory temporarily. But in the end, the truth remains. Maxwell tried to protect everyone. His company, his employees, his family, even the children who betrayed him. That's his legacy, and nothing you reveal can truly diminish it. Margot rose as well, her expression hardening. You're making a mistake. I could be a powerful ally, or a dangerous enemy. I'll take my chances, I replied calmly. Maxwell trusted me with his company for a reason. He knew I would make the right decisions, even the difficult ones. As if on cue, the cabin door opened and Agent Kimura appeared, flanked by 2 officers. Time's up, Mrs. Whitcroft. Xavier didn't resist as one of the officers moved to handcuff him. He simply looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps resignation, perhaps a flicker of respect. She's just like him, he said to Margot. Stubborn, principled, willing to sacrifice anything for what she believes is right. Yes, Margot agreed, her voice tinged with something almost like admiration. Perhaps that's why he chose her after all. Outside, the marina had come to life with activity. Police officers securing the scene, news vans gathering at the perimeter, curious onlookers watching from a distance. The private moment of revelation was over, replaced by the public spectacle that would inevitably follow. Detective Caldwell was waiting on the dock, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Mrs. Whitcroft, you're all right? I'm fine, I assured him, though fine seemed an inadequate description for the emotional upheaval I was experiencing. Xavier came willingly. There was no threat. And the conversation? He pressed. We caught most of it through the wire, but there were gaps. I hesitated, my hand tightening around the letter in my pocket. The revelations about Xavier's parentage, about Maxwell and Margot's past relationship, did those belong in police reports, court documents, news headlines? Nothing relevant to the criminal investigation, I said finally. Personal matters. Family history. Caldwell looked skeptical but didn't push further. We'll need a formal statement, of course, and you should be prepared. This case is attracting significant media attention. The Whitcroft name, the scale of the fraud, the family drama. It's going to be very public. I nodded, glancing toward the gathering news crews. I understand, but first I need to go home, to Halcyon. Home. The word felt different now, weighted with new knowledge, new responsibilities, new possibilities. Halcyon wasn't just a house that had come to me through marriage or inheritance. It was the place where I'd built a life with Maxwell, where we'd shared truths and kept secrets, where we'd loved each other despite our flaws and limitations. The drive back to the estate was silent, my mind too full for conversation. Agent Kimura respected my withdrawal, focusing on the road and occasionally checking in with her colleagues via radio. The sky had begun to darken, streaks of crimson and gold painting the horizon as day shifted toward evening. When we arrived at Halcyon, the house stood quiet and dignified against the twilight, unchanged despite the seismic shifts in my understanding of the life that had been lived within its walls. "Will you be all right alone tonight?" Kimura asked, as we stepped into the foyer. "I can stay or have another agent posted." "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," I replied. "Xavier is in custody, Piers and Bianca as well. The immediate danger has passed." She nodded, though her professional instincts seemed reluctant to leave me unprotected. "Detective Caldwell will want to meet with you tomorrow to formalize your statement. And Mrs. Whitcroft, the media is already requesting interviews. You might want to consider preparing a statement." After she left, I moved through the house slowly, turning on lights against the gathering darkness. In the study, I placed Maxwell's letter and the original will in the desk drawer, not yet ready to decide their ultimate fate. The silence enveloped me, not the tense, wary silence of recent days, but something gentler, almost contemplative. For the first time since Maxwell's death, I felt truly alone with his memory, with the complex, flawed, loving man I had married. I poured myself a small glass of his favorite scotch and settled into his chair by the window, looking out over the gardens now silvered with moonlight. So many secrets revealed, so many truths still to process. Xavier, Maxwell's biological son with Margot. The fraud scheme that had hastened Maxwell's death. The second will that had transferred control of an empire into my hands. My phone chimed with an incoming message. Josephine asking if she should return to Halcyon tonight or in the morning. I texted back quickly, suggesting morning would be soon enough, finding myself grateful for one more night of solitude to collect my thoughts. As I set the phone down, my gaze fell on a framed photograph I'd never particularly noticed before. Maxwell standing on a sailboat, much younger, his arm around an equally youthful Margot. Both smiling, both unaware of the complicated future that awaited them. I picked it up, studying their expressions, searching for hints of the relationship that had produced a child, created decades of secrecy. Had Maxwell truly loved Margot once? Had she loved him? Or had theirs been a moment of weakness, a brief passion that created consequences neither was prepared to face honestly? I would never know the full truth. Some secrets had died with Maxwell. Others remained locked in the hearts of those who had been closest to him. All I could do was move forward with the knowledge I had, making the best decisions possible for myself, for the company, for the legacy Maxwell had entrusted to me. Setting down the photograph, I moved to the window, gazing out at Halcyon's gardens bathed in night. Tomorrow would bring police statements, legal proceedings, media inquiries, board meetings, the inevitable public aftermath of the Whitcroft scandal. But tonight was mine, a precious interlude of quiet reflection before stepping fully into my new role. What would I do with Whitcroft Industries? Maintain control, as Maxwell had intended, or sell my stake once the company was stabilized? What about Margot's claim to 30%? Legally baseless now, but morally. She had helped build the company, had been Maxwell's partner for decades. Did that merit consideration despite her recent actions? And what of Xavier, Piers, and Bianca? The modest trust funds Maxwell had allocated in his second will, should those stand? Or were their actions so beyond redemption that even that limited inheritance should be revoked? Questions without simple answers. Decisions that would shape not just my future, but the lives of thousands of employees, shareholders, community members who depended on Whitcroft Industries. I took a sip of scotch, letting its warmth spread through me. Maxwell had faced similar complex choices throughout his life, balancing business interests against personal relationships, navigating secrets and obligations, trying to do right, by everyone even when right had no clear definition. Perhaps that was his true legacy to me. Not just a company or a fortune, but the understanding that life rarely offers perfect solutions. That love and duty sometimes conflict. That the best we can do is act with integrity based on the information we have, understanding that future revelations may cast our choices in a different light. The grandfather clock in the hallway, the one Maxwell had insisted on restoring. Himself, despite having no experience with antiques, chimed softly, marking the hour. Tomorrow would arrive soon enough, with all its demands and complications. For now, I allowed myself to simply be present in this moment, in this house that had witnessed so much joy and sorrow, truth and deception, beginnings and endings. Whatever came next, Halcyon would remain my anchor, not because it was a Whitcroft family property or a symbol of wealth and status, but because it was where Maxwell and I had built our life together, imperfect and real. Outside, clouds drifted across, the moon momentarily dimming its light before moving on. I watched the shadows shift across the garden, thinking of changes, those we choose and those thrust upon us, those we resist and those we embrace. Maxwell had chosen me to carry his legacy forward, to make the difficult decisions he could no longer make himself. Not because I was perfect or all-knowing, but because he trusted my judgment, my resilience, my capacity to adapt to whatever truths might emerge. I would honor that trust, not by preserving some idealized version of Maxwell Whitcroft or the company he built, but by moving forward with clear-eyed determination, acknowledging both his strengths and his flaws, building on his vision while creating my own. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be legal battles, public scrutiny, difficult choices at every turn. But for the first time since Maxwell's death, I felt truly ready to face whatever came next, not just as his widow, carrying out his final wishes, but as Eleanor, Whitcroft in my own right, writing the next chapter of a story that was now mine to tell. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out!